Hello, my name's David. I am doing this interview for my ethnic studies class at Madera Community, where we study the experience of minority groups in America. Do I have your permission to share and record our conversation from my
Yes.
professor?
Yes.
Perfect. So, tell me about yourself growing up. What was it like where you grew up?
Well, I grew up in just outside Nairobi, Kenya. I was born there when I was born, obviously, and I moved to the States when I was about 7. Growing up was interesting. I went to school. I had friends. We went to a common church and everything, but we lived on the outskirts of the city, so it was really spaced out. So we lived on like a decent sized plot of land. All of my friends were a couple miles away from me. It was funky, but like we had people at the house who were helping out, and so never a shortage of people to be around.
Did you go to school there?
Yeah, I went to a primary elementary school. Not like anything really here. We kind of just our preschool, as you would call it here, was more focused on music and art rather than starting to learn A's and B's and numbers and stuff. So.
How did you find yourself moving here to Fresno?
Well, my dad came under some complicated health problems, which Kenya couldn't really deal with, or they didn't have all of the recovery needs for that. So he's from England, so we could have either moved there or come to the States. And my mother was originally from the Central Valley, so we moved here because it was cheap. And back in '08, it was rough, but
That was when you immigrated here?
yes.
So you didn't have too much trouble immigrating here because your mom was...
Yeah, my mom was a United States American. So when we came here, me and my sister were able to gain citizenship. My dad still has a green card, but yeah, we got citizenship through my mom.
Oh. Well, this is a very generalized question, but how do you feel about your ethnic group?
Well, that's an interesting question for me because I don't know, I have an interesting part in a lot of different groups. You know, it's like my dad's British, so I have a bunch of family in England. And then my mom's side of the family is from America, but they're all Danish and Dutch. So, like my grandparents were first immigrants from the Netherlands and stuff, so we still have very strong ties back to there. So ethnically, it's Northern European, but I still have very strong ties to Kenya and Nairobi and all those areas there.
That is interesting. You kind of have a trifecta of
It's funky. It's European,
identity.
American, and African, all kind of
Yeah.
curled into a ball. So it's like ethnically, I'm not even entirely sure what I am. I would say Danish, Dutch, and English, but where I was born and then where I moved, and it's all, yeah,
We would say like multi-ethnic, maybe.
probably. At least culturally diverse, yes.
What's your job or major?
Well, I'm majoring in construction management architecture at the moment, and my job is I'm an intern for a management company. So, yeah, still trying to get fully employed, but interning right now.
That's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
You're already and slowly shimmying your way into the field.
Yeah, I'm already in the field.
Pretty much. In general, have you encountered any problems reaching this point in your life?
Well, I mean, I would say the biggest problem was the cultural switch from living in Africa to living in America.
Oh yeah.
It was funny actually. Back in Kenya when I was younger, like we knew of white people and we knew of black people because there was no other person there. There was no in between. And so when my mom I don't even really remember this, but my mom has a vivid memory of us moving to the States, and I'm just kind of culturally taken back by like no racism, but all the brown people, because it's like there was a whole middle section that I didn't even know existed. I just thought it was white or black, and then I was.
That is true. Some cultures, they don't really see other ethnic groups ever.
We didn't. And then when I came here, like I saw like an Hispanic guy for the first time when I was 7, and before that I just saw white people and black people. So I was.
It was just like that for me.
I was like, what the heck is like? There's so much, you know.
In Armenia, there was actually no such thing as black people.
Mm-hmm.
There never were any. It was straight up The ethnic roundup was 98% Armenian. There was almost no
Yeah.
immigrants. The 2%, at least 1% to 2% of that is just Kurds, which is another
The
ethnic
workers
group.
and stuff.
It's another ethnic group. They occupy that region. There's some in Iran and some in Azerbaijan and some in Turkey. But that's it. We're mountainous people,
Yeah.
and we look white, but we're
You guys
located
are,
around the Middle East.
Yeah.
But back to you. Do you currently use any services to improve the situation?
Well, so like several of my family members are dyslexic, and my dad, he had to do disability for a little while from his brain aneurysm. But yeah, that was that was a medical complication. But yeah, no, I mean, we not too much. We haven't needed too much stuff. My mom's a teacher, so
That's good to know.
We've been all right, but yeah, we haven't needed a whole lot of extra outsourcing stuff.
What were jobs like in Kenya? Because you said your mom is a teacher.
Oh wow. Well, they're very different from the States. They kind of have an OSHA, but not really.
Oh.
So, it's, I don't know. It's third world. So you have like the very, very top people, which take part in government, which take part in, the top 1% companies that pretty much make up of it, because Nairobi, I mean, Africa is completely different from America. It's like you have the continent of Africa, but you have all these different individual countries. And then in America, you have one big kind of country that's run by all these little states. But in Africa, you have all these little states, which are countries, but they don't run the continent.
It's similar with Europe. Europe is around the same size as the U.S., but the U.S. is
totally
compiled
different.
of states ran by the same federal government, as opposed to Europe, which is all separate governments. Sure, there's the EU, but most of that has begun disassembling. I'm sure you've heard of Brexit.
Yep. Yeah,
The UK leaving.
I lost citizenship to all of Europe through Brexit.
Because of that?
I just have British citizenship
gosh.
now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must be a crazy story.
It was interesting, yeah. Prior Brexit, I could have moved to Rome or Italy or anywhere, and
You could have been anywhere, but ever since they left, you kind of lost that ability to move to those countries.
now it's just that little island.
Wow. I guess I could see why the situation was so divided.
Yeah, it was interesting.
What was your primary language in Kenya?
It was English.
It was
for
still
sure.
English?
Yeah, because the people of Nairobi, Kenya, it's a British colonized country, so Swahili was, if it wasn't English, Swahili was their primary language, which was the native tongue there.
Yeah, that was what I was kind of curious about.
Yeah, so we had Swahili and English, but if you didn't grow up kind of in a household that spoke Swahili, English was your primary language.
What would you say was the primary, like, ethnic group? Like, what was the primary...
Kenyans.
I guess the primary demographic in Kenya?
Well, it's relative to where you are. So in Kenya, I would say throughout the entire country, it's probably 94% like African Kenyan people. And then you have a small group of Indian people and a small group of white people. But outside of that, like, there's not really any South American people there. There's a few European people, but they're kind of people like me, who it's kind of few and far between.
Is it hard? Would you say it's a country that hardly sees immigration to it?
Well, it varies, because one difference, the difference about Kenya and America is they're constantly going through civil wars. Like here in the United States, we had our big civil war, and that was it. In Kenya, they have an election every 4 years. Every 4 years, they have a civil war. So whichever side loses, the other side just goes and starts,
It gets that violent
it gets
within
violent.
each election.
So it's like the immigration is there's possibilities, there's opportunities and stuff, but Kenya itself, especially Nairobi, Kenya, the main city, is kind of it's kind of hard to want to move there, because it's you'll find the same opportunities in other countries that aren't having civil wars every 4 years.
So how would you say? You said it was kind of democratically run?
Mm-hmm.
Because you said elections. So how would the government there compare to the government here?
Kind of similar, in where you have like two main groups. Most of the time, it's one group is the guy who's representing that group is a businessman, possibly ex-military guy, who has been involved with the government business. Another guy, who's mostly on the other end, is more of like a social guy. So he grew up like a farmer. Once more,
Doesn't sound that different from the Central Valley.
It's almost like Republican, and like, you have one people that's like, money to the government, money to the military, money to this, and then the other person that's like, give more money to the people, put more.
That's how elections are here.
And so it's pretty much the same there, only whichever side loses, the other side just goes crazy and starts going rampant on the other side. So
that's very interesting. Sounds like enforcement is kind of loose there.
Oh yeah, no, it's their police and their law system is totally corrupt. If anyone gets pulled over by a police officer, it's, instead of going to jail, it's give me $15 and
bribing.
You go. Yeah,
that happens in Armenia too.
Everything's bribed.
That happens in Armenia too.
It's totally corrupt.
That happened to my parents when they took a visit to Moscow. And this was after the collapse of the Soviet Union. A Russian officer pulled them over, and what happened was my dad was going back and forth with him. Clearly, he was not listening to reason, so he gave him I think it was 500 rubles, and he just let them go.
Yeah, that's how it is in a lot of places. America's the one where it's kind of like you can't bribe the police.
I don't know what the officer pulled them over for, but there's probably a story behind it. But just that bribery part, pretty common. So it sounds no different from where my parents came from.
Third world country. I mean, it's just kind of.
Armenia's more like a second world because it was aligned with the Soviets.
Yeah. Well, it depends on when you are dating Armenia, because it's like Armenia had some very rough times.
Oh, a lot. Based on everything I've heard. As far as here or even there, have you done any activities related to your ethnicity?
Well, I got a tattoo.
The British, American, and Kenyan.
Yeah, so I have this tattoo here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a British flag for my dad, and then an American flag for my mom, and then there's the Kenyan shield and spears, which is the middle of their flag.
Wow.
And then the tribe that I grew up next to, we were really, really close with some of their members, and so this was their little pattern that they had. Because they didn't have like a specific pattern, but in Kenya they had these robes that were called kakois, and each kakoi was made of a different line that had patterns in it. So it was like one line of the maybe checker pattern, and then another line of striped pattern, and another line of a jagger pattern, and they would like knit these together into a blanket, and it was called a kakoi. So this was one of those line patterns that they would put on their kakois in that tribe. So I put it on my arm.
Do you still do stuff like that here?
Well, I got the tattoo here. so yeah.
Okay, I guess other than the tattoo, do you engage in any clubs, sports, in the name of your ethnicity?
No, I don't know. It's kind of it's funky for me, because it's like, if I were to go out and approach all these different people, like, because number one, I haven't really found any like Kenyan club or like this organization for Kenya, so it's like those are kind of rare. And then if that did exist, if I walk up there and I'm like, hey, let me be a part of your club, that might look a little funky, because I don't exactly look
You don't look Kenyan?
I don't look Kenyan at all, so.
Because you do. I mean, people would look at you and say you just look like an ordinary white person.
I'm a white
probably.
American guy, yeah.
Same with me, but the truth is less simple than that. So.
Well, it sucks too, because I feel like that's the story behind everyone in America. Like everyone here is like had to immigrate at some point, had to come from a family that immigrated, and so it's like I feel like a ton of people can look at their own story and go, oh, I'm so unique, I'm so interesting, my family came from this, we came from that, but then towards everyone else, it's so easy for them to just go, you're a white guy in America, you're a black guy in America.
That's kind of what
like,
stereotyping is for.
It's so easy. Like I feel like everyone here does that, but
Taking
it's so easy
these complicated stories and meshing it into one to make assumptions easier.
But it's not even like they're taking the stories into account. It's just skin color is what it is. It's just racism. It sucks. But
wow.
Yeah.
Well,
any more questions?
Have you? I think this would be a good one to end on.
Okay.
I could start off general and just say, what are your thoughts on racism? But that would be too easy. I'd rather say, have you experienced racism? It doesn't have to be that the racism or discrimination happened directly at you, but you could have seen it too.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything like that?
Well, I would say I'd probably experienced it more than seen it, because it's very few and far between when you have a person of white skin color being born in a black country, moving here when they're in a time in their life where brain development is like in half, you know. So it's like you have a person who's me, who's this. I'm supposed to, by the American look, I'm supposed to fall nicely into this category, right? Rich white person, everything's handed to me.
Strong
perfect.
prejudice here.
And then my background comes from like, well, I was born in an extremely poor country where we didn't have a whole lot. We had stuff, but we didn't have a whole lot, and there were struggles and stuff there. And then a big struggle happened, which was my dad having a brain aneurysm. We moved here. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like I've been judged. I feel like it's easy for me to say I've been judged by everybody, you know, like of all races. But
so would you say there was more prejudice here than in Kenya?
Now that's actually a really, really good question, because in Kenya, the prejudice was our family or something. We would go visit, you know, a friend's family's tribe or something, and we'd show up and there'd be little kids there that have never in their life seen a white person. So we show up to this tribe and people are pointing at us saying, oh, there's a ghost, oh, that person's dead, and things like that. And it's like, I could call that prejudice, but all that is it's just they haven't experienced that, they haven't seen that, so they're scared. And it's like, you know, I could be, when I was in Kenya, I was called a ghost, but then like here in America, you know, you say something like, you look one direction and they say you're this or say you're that and stuff. So I would say the prejudice is from different levels. I would say the prejudice that I experienced in Kenya came from just a state of fear and a state of not knowing. Like the people that were prejudiced were just scared and didn't know what the heck was happening. Whereas the people here are more driven by like possibly a hate rather than a fear. So
that's a really good analysis of
so
that.
there might be a fear aspect that originally started the hate, you know, like police and stuff like that. But I feel like we're driven to, you know, hate before being afraid instead of being afraid before we hate. Whereas
could it be that the U.S. started with fear, but over time began an evolutionary process into hate?
I'd say that's how it always starts. I would say it's a constant pattern of someone being afraid of something, and then that something they're afraid of causing them harm or causing someone else harm, and that person who's afraid sees that. I feel like it's a pattern that is created that makes them hate. And in America, I'm not going to say like it's like systemic racism or anything, but I feel like there is a lot of different patterns that a lot of different cultures have experienced here that leads them to feel picked on, hated on, and stuff like that. And I mean, America is the first country in the world that kind of is a mixing pot. So it's like we're like the trial run here. So, you know, we have beauties and stuff, but I feel like one of those really hard struggles is just you can get some really, really hateful people who've experienced a lot of fear.
The U.S. is like a brew house of different.
Yeah, and so for some people, it just hasn't worked out in their best interest, and it's just been a brew house of hate, fear, knockdown. You know, and it's just led them to be miserable. But
would you say the U.S. could find a way to sort of break out of this cycle?
I don't know. I don't know, honestly. because
Yeah.
it's deep. I mean, there's no one's going to say it's a shallow hatred. I mean, the people that, we have American slavery and all sorts of stuff that go back hundreds of years.
I don't know if you've heard the saying, the wound is deep, but that's nothing you can't heal.
Yeah, that's true. I think people can heal. I think people have the ability to. I think people have the ability to forgive, but I don't know. I'm religious, so I think it takes more than just us. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think everyone's capable of it.
But you can at least, you can play your part.
Oh yeah.
And at least contribute to it. I do think people have
Mhm.
been trying to do that. And personally, I think racism here in the U.S., the only way it can go away is with time.
Uh-huh.
Some wounds, you can't put a Band-Aid on it.
No.
You can't try to suppress it immediately,
Mhm.
which is what I feel like we tried doing in the past 5 years and it didn't work.
Yeah.
It still exists. It's a mentality thing. For some people, it kind of brews for generations, and the U.S. has lived long enough for that to kind of be cemented in some people.
Mhm.
The only thing we can hope is that it disintegrates
Mhm.
with time. It's steady. You have to kind of let it die out naturally.
Mhm.
People have noticed there has been less racism, discrimination, and prejudice now than there has maybe even 30 years ago.
Mhm.
It's noticeably less, but it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be low, but never zero.
No, it'll never be zero. You'll always get bad apples and stuff. I mean,
That's true.
there's always going to be one person or a couple people who just screw it up. But I would say that to start fixing the problem, it's not like a government thing or
Mhm.
anything like that. I think it just comes down to the person. If you're a person who's living in America and you get into a verbal argument or it's going to be a physical argument or whatever's happening, like you just have to ask yourself, what's my story and what's the other person's story? Because
Mhm.
a lot of the times it's not what you did that makes them so mad, it's something that you triggered. That's
Perspective.
that they're already mad about. So, if you're able to sit down and kind of just break that down, then for so many people they can overcome what they're originally angry about, or at least figure out what they're angry about. But
True. Well, I would say this went well. I certainly got to know a lot about you, and this is good info for me as well to know, especially in the future. Anything else that comes up, I'll think of the relevance of this interview.
thank you.
So, thank you for making this a great interview. It
My
was nice
pleasure.
knowing you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, David.
It was great to have you too, Daniel.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
All right. How much time do we have?